Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you, Ken?
I'm exceptionally well. This is episode 104 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, and you're in for a treat. We're starting off today speaking about preparing for residentials. And Rory and I were just talking about this and kind of looking back over the over 100 podcasts that we've done. We haven't touched on this topic before, so it's coming your way. And in practice with Rory today, well, what can you expect? We're going to be looking at what is a professional body. Now, this is something, Rory, that comes up time and time again, isn't it? It can be so confusing.
It is ultimately confusing. There are a number of professional bodies that represent counselling and psychotherapy in the UK. And what I'm going to try and do is get a sense of who they are and who they serve. I think that's probably the best way of describing it.
Like that. And I guess the message on that is that we have choice when it comes to the choice of a professional body, but more on that in Practice Matters. And we're going to be ending episode 104 by speaking about breaking confidentiality. But we're going to kind of really niche that down. We're going to focus in and we're going to be speaking about breaking confidentiality in regards to HIV and AIDS. And that is a question that has come in from our Facebook group. In fact, most of the topics that we discuss here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast come from members of our Facebook group. Over 20,000 members. If you want to jump in there and become part of that conversation, just get onto Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. We're right at the top. Knock on our door. We will welcome you in. So let's get started with preparing for residentials, Rory.
Yeah, so it's about this time of year that some learning institutions take the students away, maybe to a hotel or maybe to a residential setting and have an away weekend. And I used to think it was the highlight of the year. And one of the reasons that we have residentials or extended psychotherapy marathons or extended days is that awarding bodies usually ask for them, I have to say. The awarding bodies say you need an extended weekend. And also it's a time of reflection and people to get to know each other a bit more. You know, tutors can get to know the students can get to know each other. And it's a time of processing. You know, it really does link, I think, to personal development. And certainly when I ran them, a lot of the workshops that I ran were around personal development and reflection and considering, you know, how your past may affect your here and now experiencing. So there'll be a lot of people, I suspect, going away, getting ready to go away and feeling perhaps a little bit nervous.
Butterflies in the tummy. Nervous and maybe excited, looking forward to that. And you know, if you look at the structured lessons within your learning institution, college, university, there's always that focus on theory. We need to understand the theory so we can get that into the assignments. We have to practice the skills. We're evaluated on that. But it's not easy to evaluate personal development. And I'm not saying a residential is evaluating personal development, but it is an area where we can really dive deep into ourselves, getting to know our peers on our course. And I've said this before, and I'll revisit it now. The peers that you do your counselling training with, if you go on and go into therapy, chances are a number of them may go on and go into giving therapy as well, and they become people that you may refer to and receive referrals from. I certainly, from my group, still I'm in contact with a number of people from my group and have referred and received referrals from. So it's a great opportunity to get to know people on a level that's maybe a little deeper than just the lunch break in between the lectures.
Indeed. And it's a time for personal reflection because you're away from your families. You're there, and the whole thing is based and focused on personal growth, personal development. And if the tutors are kind of any good, I'm sure they are. I'm sure all the tutors are really good. Is that the exercises or the workshops will be around reflection on self, because part of becoming a counsellor, and I'd say a good section of becoming a counsellor, is about your own personal journey, and you're understanding your own process. And for those of you who are doing personal development assignments, you'll notice there's a emphasis on that, because you have to know yourself before you can help other people. It's just one of those things. You have to understand your own process. And I'm going to mention the T word again: transference.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to. No, there it is. You got to know, yourself, what triggers you, where the transferences are, so that when you're in the therapy room with a client, you're aware of it. And it's called self-awareness for a very good reason, Ken.
It is indeed. And again, going back to the more formal side of the studies, yes, we will visit personal development as part of our studies, maybe within a PD, personal development group. But having that deep focus on it is so important. And you can actually, if you kind of make notes after your residential, you have got amazing fodder for that personal development assignment. So there's a tip for you. Get back from your residential and write stuff down. And I have one other tip when it comes to residentials. A residential can be draining. It can be emotionally draining. You can experience varied emotions. And kind of keep that in mind for what it is that you're going back to. So as an example, if you have a really busy work schedule, if you can, it may be worth taking a day's leave and popping that at the end of your residential, so that you're coming back and you've got a little bit of time just to change that gear before you back into that heavy work, because you can be carrying some emotions over from your residential. And it's about being kind to yourself, maybe.
Absolutely. I can remember my level 3 residential, which is probably where the most shift went. And strangely enough, most of my students would say that the level 3 residential is probably the most powerful. And I can remember spending the day sat on a rock just down the road at a reservoir near where I live now, just thinking, oh, the whole world's changed. The whole world has changed. So, do take some time at the end of that to just look after yourself, and also remember that your loved ones that you go back to won't have experienced the kind of process that you've gone through. So you may come back as a slightly different person, and of course they're going to ask you, "What have you done? What have you done?" Tree hugging was usually the question that people have. You've been hugging trees. You've been hugging trees, haven't you? And I just said, just remember that they've not. When I debrief, that they've not had the process that you've gone through, and please tell them we don't hug trees. Please do that.
Your residential is interesting. I had no idea to what to expect from going into my first residential, other than that it was kind of briefed before going in as a lesson of what we might expect. But it's interesting now, looking back on my studies, which spanned, I guess, 3.5, close on 4 years, if you take it from going into to counselling concepts, that beginning course. When I look back on my studies, it's kind of a muddle. I don't remember a lot of stuff that jumps out and stands out for me. But boy, do I remember the residentials. They stand out. They are beacons when I look back on my studies. And I found myself in tears, in floods of uncontrollable tears at my residential, because I was exploring self, and I was doing that in a safe environment. I was doing that with peers, supported by them, and it was very, very emotional indeed.
Yeah, I remember that, Kim. And I do. And and just to remind everybody that some learning institutions go away. They may go to a hotel or a residential area, kind of like sometimes they use seminaries, we used to go to a Catholic seminary and use their rooming for it. Sometimes they're done within the institution. So with the way that budget cuts are now, sometimes it's just one long day where you turn up at college. I don't think it's the same personally. I think the idea of being away from people and just having a chance and staying overnight, I think is probably more beneficial. But I do know that they're run maybe over a weekend at college or maybe over 2 days. And they are life-changing events. I can't think of anybody that I've ever taught, and including myself, I went through three, where people's lives hasn't shifted, their perceptions shift. I know mine shifted quite dramatically. And I was glad of it. Really.
Yeah, I guess one other tip to kind of leave this as therapists, psychotherapists in training, being a counselor, being a psychotherapist, there's a level of being informed in who you are and what you do, how you present yourself. And I suggest take just a tiny bit of that into you in with you in your residential. If there is a bar in the hotel you're staying in or a pub nearby, it's a great idea to get together and have a chat and a laugh. But having that one or two drinks too many can really kind of spoil the next day and your ability to be able to engage in that and get the most out of it. So there's just a one tiny tip, and that's from feedback from students that I've had that have wished that they hadn't had that extra glass of wine.
Yeah, it's not a party. A lot of people, I used to say to my students, it's not a party. This isn't, a weekend, a fun weekend away. This is a learning workshop. And anybody, I used to have a strict face, and anybody who comes down in the morning looking like they've had too much, I certainly won't be allowing them to participate, because no one wants to do counselling skills, talk about very deep and kind of raw material with someone who's got a hangover. It's just not fair, and it's not right.
Yeah.
And I think it only happened a couple of times where I had to say to people, I suggest you come back after lunch, because, clearly you've had one too many last night, because they were clearly unwell. But it didn't happen often, because, it's not a party weekend. And I know a lot of people might think it is, but it's not a party weekend. It is a workshop, part of the course. And, and you don't want too much in vino veritas either. In wine truth, that's Latin. In vino veritas. I've sat with some students who've had maybe too much to drink, and they've told a few truths to someone, and it's not gone down very well. Yeah, in vino veritas, it's my word of the day.
Like it. A little bit of Latin. It is Latin, is it?
Latin, yeah.
Excellent. A little bit of Latin there to take it out of that topic. So we're about to jump into practice matters. As I say quite often, possibly my favorite part of the podcast, because this is where the tire hits the road, the rubber hits the road, because this is, you're there, you've got a client in front of you, and it's what we consider when we go into practice matters. And of course, to get into practice, we need to be a member of a professional body, and that can be confusing when you get to that stage. Sometimes you kind of think that you only have one choice. But Rory, you're going to be covering this in a little bit of detail.
I am. Something that comes up a lot in our Facebook page, and if you're not a member of our Facebook page, and you should be, if you could type Counselling Tutor into Facebook, you'll find our closed Facebook page. Click on it, knock on the door, and join 22,500 other like-minded people. You'll find tutors, supervisors, qualified colleagues, students, people interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, all helping, all supporting each other. And sometimes we get some really good questions come up. And one of the perennial areas of confusion is the many ethical bodies we have in the UK. And I'm going to try and cut through that confusion and give some clarity on that, and really get across the fact that you have a choice. You have a choice. And sometimes I think that's not really transmitted properly.
Practice Matters with Rory after this very short message. Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
In this part of the podcast, I'm going to deal with a question that comes up time and time again, both on the Facebook page and certainly in the mailbox or the mailbag I get from people who email me. And that is, what are ethical bodies? What do they do? What's their function? And what's the difference between an ethical body and an awarding body? Well, I'm going to deal with that last question first. An awarding body is the body that awards your certificate. They're an academic body that set the criteria for your papers, for your exams, or for your assignments, the dreaded criteria. They set it. They have a kind of a curriculum of work, and then once you complete it and it's passed by an external moderator, someone from the awarding body, then you're deemed as passed. And once you pass, you get your diploma or your certificate, and on those is your name and the awarding body. And some of the awarding bodies you'll know because you'll probably be studying under them. AIM Awards, ABC Awards, CPCAB and BTEC. They're all very, very popular awarding bodies and do counselling qualifications. If you're at university, it's a slightly different thing because the awarding body is actually the university. So when you get your degree or your master's, it'll have the university name on. So let's now think about what an ethical body is. Well, an ethical body is an organisation who sets ethical standards that protect the general public and offer support to practitioners. This support can include access to updated research, continual professional development opportunities such as conferences or courses. And also they should offer support for ethical and legal issues. A lot of ethical bodies have a support line. You can give them a ring and they will try and, they won't tell you the answer, but what they will do is give you a number of options so you can make your own decision. If a complaint is made by a member of the public against a practitioner, the ethical body can investigate, and if wrongdoing is found, sanction, which is get the therapist to do a body of work and submit it, and then a panel meets, they have a look at that work and decide if the counsellor, the therapist, has got enough insight into what they've done wrong to have corrected it and not do it again, and then the sanction's lifted, or in very serious circumstances can strike somebody off. The other thing that ethical bodies do is they talk a lot about research, they fund research, and also they sit at the table of decision makers. They speak to power, and those can be regulatory bodies as well as commissioning bodies that commission or buy in counselling, such as the NHS. So they have an awful lot of influence, and there is a lot of them. And when I did my research, I discovered that there was actually 14 ethical bodies or professional bodies in the UK and Northern Ireland. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and break down what these bodies do. I'm not going to speak about all of them, but there is a list with links, so you get the handout and you can see what they all do. There's really three most well-known ones, and those three are the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy, the BACP. They're very, very well known. The National Counselling Society, and also UKCP, the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy. So already in those three, the joining criteria for one of them is different to the other two. The UKCP will let you join only if you've done certain types of courses, you've had certain types of therapy, you've had to have a lot of therapy. So not everyone could join the UKCP. Typically people have done psychotherapy courses, transactional analysis, or Gestalt courses over 5 or 7 years would join the UKCP. The British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy and the National Counselling Society, the NCS, students can join as members, students, and then they go on to develop full membership. There's what's called a Certificate of Proficiency test that the BACP run, and that's, I believe, now run at home. It's a computer-based test, and if you pass that, once you've qualified, then you get full membership, or you get membership, you'll become MBACP. So what are the other type of ethical bodies that are available? Well, there's the British Psychoanalytical Council, and they are, or the BPC, and they're an association of institutions made up of psychoanalysts, analytical psychologists, and child psychotherapists. So that's the British Psychoanalytical Council. Then for our colleagues who are psychologists, there's the British Psychological Society. That represents psychologists and psychology in the UK. Then there's more specialist types of bodies. COST, C-O-S-T, College of Sexual and Relational Therapists, for people who've studied maybe sex addiction or sexual dysfunction. People can join that, and that's a specific body for that particular presentation or presentations related to it. The Federation of Drug and Alcohol Professionals, that's an organisation that people join if they may be working with in rehabs or detox units, counselling in that arena, and that's a specialist body that deals specifically with drugs and alcohol. So there's another one. And then, of course, our friends in Scotland, COSCA, which is Scotland's professional body for counselling and psychotherapy. It's kind of Scotland's own ethical body. And then for our friends, of course, over in the Republic of Ireland, the Irish Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, known as the IACP. There is just so many of them. And usually what would happen is that you would get asked to join as a student. So usually what happens, you join your practice years where you're going out to practice, and your tutor would either hand you a form and say you join this ethical body. But here's the thing. Ethical bodies are a little bit like banks. Once people have joined them, they tend to stay with them for a long time, and just tend to just stick with them. But you can actually change your ethical body. I know a number of people who've swapped out and decided to leave one ethical body or join another. I've even known people who've actually joined two ethical bodies. So I had a friend, still have a friend thankfully, who's joined the BACP and then went on to join the UKCP, the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy, and is accredited in both of those. So you can join one or two ethical bodies. So that's ethical bodies explained. I think the one thing I want people to take away from this is that have a look at which ethical body supports you. Have a think about what you want as a practitioner and make an informed choice. Sometimes, during training, you're told you have to join one body. But on graduation, you do have a choice. So have a look at this list, go onto all the websites and just see just how many ethical bodies there are.
Thank you as always, Rory. It just makes it so much clearer. And if you would like to download Rory's super duper handout that he has specially created for this podcast episode, you can do so by going to our website. That is counsellingtutor.com, 2 L's in the word counselling. We're based in the UK. Counsellingtutor.com. On our main page, click on the podcasts tab. Navigate your way to episode 104. Right on that page, all of the details of what we've spoken about today, including any links out to external resources. And of course, right there on that page, you can get Rory's super duper handout from today's episode by just popping in your email and we will send it to you free of charge. And of course, if you are already a member of our paid for resource, which is called Counselling Study Resource, well, that handout has already been added to your handouts folder. No need to go to that page. You can just jump straight in, and that is there. And I think it's just worth saying, Rory, as we come out of that really important topic, that interestingly enough, in just a few weeks' time, we are going to have a professional body where you have actually done an interview. So we're going to be bringing more information on the National Counselling Society.
Yeah, stay tuned for that. It's a really good interview, and one that is quite interesting given the current situation on the SCOPED, which is the proposed changes to titles for counsellors. So stay tuned for that. It's a hot topic.
Yeah, share this episode with your peers as well, so that everybody can kind of get these messages and we can join in together. A rising tide makes all the boats go up, Rory, and the more people that we have involved in Counselling Tutor, the more informed questions we get, the better the podcast gets. So we are now talking about a topic that sends shivers through most people's blood, and that is breaking confidentiality. The whole concept of counselling is that it is a trusting, safe environment where a person can bring any information in confidence, but it is boundaried, it is contracted, and there are times that we need to break confidentiality. But today, from our Facebook page, a question has come in, and we're going to be speaking about HIV and AIDS, Rory.
Yes, we are. And if you're a person of a certain age, as I am, I can remember when HIV and AIDS came into the public consciousness. And I have to say it was handled really badly. People were stigmatized.
Yep.
People were treated incredibly poorly. And who can forget the awful government advert of a large kind of stone plinth falling backwards, and the tagline was "Don't die of ignorance." They showed it in schools, and the children. It was so badly done. The children were saying, "This ignorance, how do you get it?" It was so bad that people really, really didn't understand. And for those people who had HIV and AIDS, it was even more stigmatizing. And the question came up in a Facebook page: what would you do if you had a client who had HIV and AIDS? And I think we need to separate this. HIV is the virus. AIDS is the full illness. So people can have HIV and not go on to get AIDS. And I suggest we'll put some links. I'm going to put some links in the show notes so you can get from our friends at the Terence Higgins Trust, who do fantastic work, and you can have a look for yourself. And should you break confidentiality if someone's got HIV and they're having unprotected sex with a partner? Now, my view on this is that we don't want to criminalise people with HIV and AIDS. It's as simple as that. The treatment for HIV is massively changed in the last 30 years. It was literally a death sentence in the 80s. Now people can live long lives as long as they stay with the medication and take care of themselves. And the transmission is different because people can, because of the medication, it can be managed. So I wouldn't automatically break confidentiality if someone was having unprotected sex and they had HIV or AIDS. I think the difficulty would be if someone was actively going out to infect people. I think that's the difference. And, you know, as practitioners, we'll meet a lot of people who have venereal disease, who are having unprotected sex. That happens a lot. And if it's with adults have a choice, don't they, to use contraception and to insist on contraception, which is a barrier. So I wouldn't automatically break confidentiality. I guess that you'd have to check with your agency, because as a private practitioner, I have the luxury of making my own policies and procedures. In an agency, they may have their own view. And it's why I say to students who are in agencies on placement time again, check, understand your agency's policy. Find out, get a copy of it, chapter and verse, because if it goes wrong, the agency will say, well, you didn't follow the policy, therefore it's your fault. But if you know the policy, you can say, oh, hang on a second, this is the policy and I followed it. The policy is there to protect you and the agency. But no, I wouldn't automatically break confidentiality if someone was saying that they had HIV and they were having unprotected sex. And the British Psychological Society, and I'll put a link in for those, have said the same thing. They basically said we don't want to criminalise people who have AIDS. So my advice and my observation is I'm going to put some good links into the show notes. And one place to go is our friends at the Terence Higgins Trust, who just do fantastic work around this. They really, really are great. I worked with the Terence Higgins Trust when I was in as a tutor. They came in every year and gave sexual health advice to students and to staff. You know, if the staff were interested, they could sit in the seminars as well. And they give you the facts. They don't give you the rumours and the fear mongering. They give you the facts. So that's my take on it, Ken.
And it's an informed take. I grew up, I was born in the UK, but I grew up in South Africa, and I grew up in South Africa in the 1980s. HIV was killing millions and millions of people, and in the job that I was doing at the time, I was working in a number of different hospitals, one of them being Baragwanath, and I would go in and I was working with children in the hospitals, and it was hard because I would go back a week later, and some of the children that I'd seen the week before were no longer there anymore. And these were children that were being born with the HIV virus, which was progressing on to AIDS, and they were losing their lives. There was no medication. It was underfunded. And again, the message that was being put out was so polluted and clouded at the time. I agree with you, Rory, that it was very poorly handled when it first came out. It was marginalizing groups of people and suggesting that it was a virus that was kind of you were more prone to get it if you were a gay man, and all of that. And things have changed, and we've become educated, and that's why we have these conversations. That's why we're going to place these links in, and you go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, go to episode 104. All those links are there. Follow them, have a look at them. I agree with you, Rory. It's about your agency. It's about the contract that you have with your client and understanding it. And these are the kind of questions you should be asking your agency. If you're in an agency and in your agency contract it says harm to self and harm to others, well, go to your practice manager at your agency and ask them, give them this scenario, say, hey, what should I do if, and get the agency's take on that. And I always suggest when you do things like that, write it down, and the date that you asked it, who you asked, what they said to you, kind of say, and ask them at the time, you don't mind if I write this down, put it in your notes, in your process notes, that you have asked this, because it only becomes important if a complaint is laid against you. And if a complaint is laid against you, hearsay is worth nothing. Written down evidence with dates and who said what is first prize in that situation, is it not, Rory?
Yeah, it's not written down. It doesn't. It never
doesn't exist. Yeah,
and I would go further. I would say email the practice manager and let them email back to you their advice.
You see, that's smart, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty smart. And then you print the email out and you store it. And then if there's any, I don't want to look at practice managers or practices in a kind of way where it's us and them. That's not how it works. Practices should be inclusive. But I think that if you work for any organisation, it's really useful as a worker to have all the information so that if anything goes wrong, you can protect yourself, because ultimately it will be you protecting yourself.
100%. And I guess this topic we're speaking about now, it's also about context, as you rightly mentioned, Rory. If somebody is purposely and their intention is to go out and have unprotected sex in order to infect people, then that changes it and skews it. And there has been something in the recent news where somebody was prosecuted for that. Yeah. For that is a whole different ball game. But in general, I think I'm with you, Rory.
Yeah, and as I say, you have to take a view on a kind of case-by-case basis. But I think the thing is, you have to think that a majority of people with HIV/AIDS are responsible people.
Yep.
And they've caught this infection or this virus, and not everybody's going out to hurt people. But you're absolutely right. There has been cases where people have been prosecuted for assault, various levels of legal definitions of assault, because they've gone out to infect people. But that is just, it's just a tiny amount of people. And I suspect if they hadn't got AIDS, they'd have just hit someone with a stick or something. They probably that's probably the thinking. They probably just wanted to be horrible to people. Be thoughtful and of course supervision. That's the thing, isn't it? Go to supervision, talk it through in supervision, and get a good handle on it.
100%. And just to close off this subject, and of course this episode 104, if you have any questions, and not necessarily this one, that relate to breaking confidentiality, that relate to ethics, then contact your professional body. They should have an ethics department, and they should be able to give you information on that topic. So this has been episode 104 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We're so grateful that you joined us. We started off by speaking about preparing for residentials. In Practice Matters, we looked at what a professional body is and the fact that you have choice. And then we covered breaking confidentiality related to HIV and AIDS.
And hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.